Hi there, I'm Erin, and in this video I'm just going to give you some tips and tricks on how to start reading, read a little bit more, and just really incorporate reading in your everyday life. I've been a reader for what feels like my entire life, and I definitely have my grandma to thank for that. She had the best library in her basement, and I would always go down there, look at all the books, and take a couple for myself. So thank you, Grandma. I'm slowly but surely collecting my own library as we speak. To start things off, my first tip for you is to just make a list of all the books that you're interested in reading, whether that's a physical one with pen and paper, or a digital one on notes, or even like an Amazon list. Personally, for a book list, I use the app Goodreads. And why I love it is because it keeps track of the books that I'm interested in reading, that I'm currently reading, and that I have read. So I can feel some sort of accomplishment after I mark a book as read. But it also has other trending books and book recommendations for me when I'm interested in browsing what's out there. This really helps you get an overall grasp of the books you're interested in, how many you're interested in, and the ones that you might want to start reading first. So along with creating a list, my second tip is to figure out what source or what type of reading that best suits your lifestyle. Whether that's, a physical book, an audiobook, an ebook, or some type of other visual book. We all have a lot going on in our lives, so I understand why reading sometimes feels like too much to handle. Picking your source or type of reading will really help you figure out when you can incorporate that into your days, into your weeks, etc. So as I mentioned before, we have physical books that you can pick up from a library, a local bookstore, a friend, and any place that you can actually open it up and read is a good place to start. Whether that's making time for yourself at night for 5 minutes, or if you're using public transportation in your, daily life. Next, we have audiobooks, which I've been getting more into recently. And these can be downloaded from libraries, bookstores. There's sometimes free content online on YouTube. And this is really helpful when you're doing sort of mindless tasks in your everyday life, such as cooking, cleaning, working out, going for walks. I personally find this beneficial because I'm trying to read more. So I'm able to read a physical book and also listen to a book through audiobook. And it's super nice and just helps me tick off those books on my crazy long list. Next, we have ebooks, which once again can be downloaded from libraries, bookstores, free content on the internet. And this is really nice because you don't need a physical book, but you're still reading actual words instead of listening to it. And you can download it with whatever device that you have accessible to you, whether that's a phone, a computer, a tablet, you can always access it. And lastly, I mentioned graphic books, and that's in the form of physical books or ebooks, but instead of reading words and long paragraphs, you actually get, visuals to go along with it, which also helps you retain that information and continue on reading a story. Personally, for my source of reading, I will always be a physical book reader just because I love the feeling of it in my hands. Weirdly, I love the smell. Let's not talk about it. But also, like I mentioned, I'm getting more and more into audiobooks. And right now, I use Audible, and I'm reading Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow by what's her name? Gabrielle Zevin. It's just easy for me to be able to read 2 different types of books and 2 different forms of reading. So figuring out your source or your type of reading is super beneficial in helping you, bring that into your everyday life. So now that we've picked out our book and how we want to read it, my third tip for you is to simplify your expectations and set your goals. Now this sometimes seems like a really big tip, but it doesn't have to be that way. I sometimes hear that reading just feels like a lot of work, and while I understand that, and I've definitely been in that situation, take a step back and look at what you're expecting of yourself and if you can simplify that in any way. So simplifying your expectations can look like picking a shorter book instead of a crazy long one, deciding you're going to give yourself 2 months instead of 1 month to finish a book, choosing to read a couple times a week instead of every day so it aligns better with your lifestyle. Along those lines where it doesn't feel like such a daunting task and it's something that feels rewarding and relaxing and exciting all at once. Setting goals can look like, I'm gonna read this one short book this month. and then go from there instead of, you know, picking 40 books to read in a year and then feeling that weight just on you the entire time you're trying to read. A goal can also look like, I'm gonna read for 5 minutes every Sunday, and every time you achieve that goal, you can be set for your week ahead. So this is definitely a tip that helps you think about reading in a more positive light. And when you're starting to notice that you're going back into those negative feelings, take another step back, simplify that expectation again, kind of go through that process, just so reading can continue to be fun and exciting for you. So with your expectations and goals, it's really important to create a habit with them, which is my tip number 4. Now, I understand that creating a habit in your everyday life is really challenging and takes a lot of time. So for this, we are just gonna give ourselves the most grace we possibly can. So let's say that you set a goal that you're trying to read a shorter book within the month, and you're giving yourself 5 minutes every night to read it. Being mindful and creating that repetition of sitting down and opening up that book will really help you create that habit of reading for 5 minutes every day and then hopefully finishing that book within the month. And then it just kind of stacks on top of itself until you've created a habit and you're completing all of your goals. So my 5th and final tip for you guys is keeping books in sight and in mind. And what I mean by that is whether it's physically or digitally, you're reminded of books in everyday moments. Personally for me, I love to have physical books always around. I decorate with them, I have a library in my other room, and I have my TBR stack that's always around to remind me of all the fun books I have yet to read. What that looks like digitally for me is I follow a ton of book bloggers on Instagram, YouTube, TikTok. That just helps me, you know, be a part of the book community and be reminded of all the fantastic and beautiful books that are out there. The simpleness of it is really, once you see a book, you're reminded of the book that you are currently reading or that you want to read or want to finish. So I have 2 honorable mentions that I want to talk about. The first one is try reading with a buddy, colleague, joining a book club. This really helps you stay accountable for getting through that book, finishing that book in the time frame that you all set. And the second one is probably not an honorable mention, but more so the most important question you could ever ask yourself when reading. And that is, do you actually like the book? I know it sounds simple, but I had such trouble with this when I was reading a book that I did not like, and I felt that if I were to just put it down, not pick it back up, that felt like a fail. When in reality, I'm not trying to read like that. I'm just trying to read for fun and read for myself. So if I don't like a book, I don't have to finish it, and neither do you. So those are my 5 tips, 1 honorable mention, and 1 very important question that I hope will help you incorporate reading into your everyday life. Speaking of that, I'm gonna go open up my book because all of this talking about reading and everything is making me just want to read more. Go figure. With that, I'm sending positivity wherever you are, and I'm sure we'll talk soon. Bye.